trying to refute is race is an extraneous factor when placing children for adoption in California. My opponent has 4 secondary claims. The first one is that there is an overabundance in the California foster care system. The second is California is diverse and multiracial. The third, transracial adoptions do not affect a child's racial identity. And the fourth, the last one, restricting or delaying adoption placement due to race is discrimination. As to our first supporting point, which states that there is an overabundance in the foster care system, my counterclaim is that the overabundance in the California foster system is irrelevant to transracial adoption, because according to an article written by Mary Hansen, the number of families who adopt children from foster care has never met more than 40% of the need. Furthermore, since 1978, Congress has tried to promote the adoption of waiting children from foster care. However, even in years when the number of adoptions rose, the number of waiting children in foster care climbed as well. Her second supporting point states that California is diverse and multiracial. In her speech, she said that we are going into a different stage from what we had in the Civil Rights era, where segregation is no longer an issue here in California. My response to her reasoning is that racism still exists. In recent history, in Brown versus Board of Education, segregation was ruled unconstitutional. However, there were still laws prohibiting things like interracial marriage. Thus, diversity does not mean acceptance. My opponent's third secondary claim was that transracial adoptions do not affect a child's racial identity, contrary to popular arguments. My counterclaim is that it does. According to an article written by Mary Haynes, who has a PhD in social work, and Simon Shirley, a master's in social work, they state that 3/4 of white families adopting children of color lived in white neighborhoods and sent the children to predominantly white schools. Although the parents acknowledged the need for greater contact with people of color, they did not alter their lifestyles, and they tended to minimize the importance of race and downplay incidents of racial slurs or discrimination. Lastly, her fourth secondary claim is that restricting or delaying adoption placement due to race is discrimination. The problem with my opponent's reasoning for the secondary claim is that this secondary claim is irrelevant. It does not support the main claim that race is an extraneous factor when adopting in California. It would fit more as an introduction. My opponent in her outline has a source stating that Multi-Ethnic Placement Act has amended and has strengthened its provisions to ensure that adoption and foster placement were not delayed or denied because of race, color, or national origin. Therefore, this claim is just background information. It just justifies her argument, but it doesn't support it. So in conclusion, my opponent's claim was that race is an extraneous factor in placing children for adoption in California. However, because transracial adoption does affect a child's racial identity, race is relevant when placing children for adoption.
All right, structurally everything's easy to follow. On the first point, I think that you've got a good argument here that undermines a lot of the relevance of the issue, and that is that regardless of the amount of adoptions that occur, we're still never going to meet the needs. So this notion that transracial adoptions are somehow inhibiting or restrictions on them might in some way be inhibiting people from moving out of the system or being adopted, I think that's a good claim that undermines the whole general need there, and I think you could make that argument a little bit more clearly, but I understand the point that you're making. On the second point, where you're talking about racism still existing, the examples that you point to about Brown versus Board of Education and laws regarding marriage, those are all 40-plus years old, so I'm not exactly sure that they are contemporaneous examples, and they don't necessarily respond to the examples that the advocate's talking about. There might be other ways to minimize this argument or suggest that race issues are important, but it's not really developed here. On the third point, I thought you had some good evidence here about how there's a lack of involvement by adoptive parents in trying to maintain racial identity. What I do think is missing is some explanation about why it's important to maintain racial identity and why what the negative consequences are if it is minimized as being important. And that, to me, is where the real controversy is on this issue, and I'm not sure that either side has really developed it very clearly. On the fourth point, basically, you're just kind of challenging the relevance of it by pointing out that it's background information, which on that point I think you are correct, but that doesn't necessarily undermine the claim. I think the biggest issue is the first and the third one. The first one I think you've got a good response on. The third one you've got part of a good response, but you don't explain why in the long run it's going to be important. Thank you.